think we can start. Hello, everybody. Thank you for coming. It's a pleasure to have you here. We have, I think, a wonderful panel. I've looked at the slides, and there's a lot of information about this important topic, entrepreneurship. And I think this is probably the first entrepreneurship panel that we have in SIAM, and I'm hoping it will be followed up with others as well. My name is El-Bakry. Let me start the discussion. So the agenda is I'll just give a little bit of introduction of what we mean by entrepreneurship. Then there will be followed by panelist presentations and then a discussion. Just a quick introduction about myself. My name is El-Bakry, Senior Principal, Data Science and Optimization. I work in a group within ExxonMobil called Modeling, Data Science and Optimization, and it is one of the ExxonMobil companies, ExxonMobil Technology and Engineering. So entrepreneurship, the panelists that we have today, we have Glenn Ricart from US Ignite. We have Rob Schreiber from Cerebras Systems. Daniel Shabtai from Prism AI, and then Viral Shah from Julia Hub. They present different companies, different focus areas, as you'll see, but also different career path, which is even more important to me for especially students to see the different career path that a mathematician or a computational scientist can take in industry. What is entrepreneurship and why is it important? I think these are the couple slides that I have. There are multiple definitions. The one that I would like to actually share with you is in the next slide, but just to take a quick look, here is one from the Oxford Dictionary. It's the activity of setting up a business or a businesses taking into financial risk on the hope of a profit. Okay. Straightforward. Investopedia, what is entrepreneur? An entrepreneur is an individual who creates a new business, earning most of the risk, or bearing, sorry, most of the risk and enjoying most of the rewards or profits. The Center for American Entrepreneurship, actually, they say it's difficult to define. And there are many definitions. They have their own definition as well. But among all those three, if you look at the top right, the key things in every definition is that there is something new. There is a risk that needs to be taken. There is a big change that is the outcome of this particular activity. And there is a value or a good outcome. So these are what kind of define generally what's common among all of those. The reason I'm going with the next slide for the definition, which is from Wikipedia, is the issue about value, because all of these definitions here focus on commercial value. This is why I prefer this definition. So entrepreneurship basically is the creation or extraction of economic value in ways that generally entails beyond the minimal amount of risk. Or, and actually Wikipedia has and I replaced it with or, potentially involving values beyond simple economic ones. So there is the notion of social entrepreneurship, and we have actually examples of this today. So this is basically the definition that I like about defining what entrepreneurship means. Why do we talk about it? Well, math has provided value, computational math, applied math, computational methods, provided values for years, decades, and centuries. So this is nothing new there. However, there are few points that I would like to stress. Recently, packaging and productizing math technology is accelerating, thanks to hardware and software revolutions. And what the impact of this is accelerating concept to value. It would take years in the past, and sometimes decades, to get from a new mathematical concept to actually value. Now this can be done much, much faster. And the machine learning AI is definitely one of the latest examples of that. The other thing is the internet. We are living, at least partially living, in a virtual world, which means that we're exceedingly relying on digital technology, which has math in its core. The third thing is the need for any entrepreneur, for any solution, basically what is the problem that you're trying to solve, and the problems are many: societal, economic, technological problems and challenges. And the last one is, that's again my personal opinion, is that there is a wealth of mathematical ideas and concepts that are still to be exploited into solutions. So the entrepreneurship basically is, how do you get from a mathematical concept, a mathematical idea, a mathematical theorem or formulation into an actual value. And while in the past in industry, we would hire people to actually build, let's say, a model for process simulation, right? This is being, actually, this is changing significantly recently, because there are many third party that will actually provide that for you. So they are packaging a product that you could use. And then in some companies like ours, the mathematicians, the computational scientists are actually using those products to build other products as well into value that are much closer to the decision making. So if you look at the bottom there, in the past, again, this is a very simplification of math and the value of math in industry. In the past, we used math to indirectly provide values to the company. Then math became products, starting from, I'm probably, I don't know, 30, 40 years ago with MATLAB and companies like MATLAB, when you actually productize this into something that's sold to people. And recently, you can think of math being the value, right? Math being the money. And if you look at cryptocurrency and things like that, that's basically what it is, right? So you're actually packaging a mathematical formulation, a mathematical problem into an actual value in itself. It becomes the money, it becomes valuable in itself. So it's to me, it's just an amazing kind of progression of the value that math provides. So value for this discussion now is what's the impact on education, right? Does that change anything? Does that change what do we define the degrees, the PhD? What does the PhD actually entails? What should the PhD students learn? Could this be part of that? Specialization curriculum, potentially. Encourage entrepreneurship mindset with students in the mathematical and the computational science area, and potentially shifting the role of math and computational people in industry. As I said, from starting building things from scratch, now you're much closer to the decision making, so there is a shift of what is the role of mathematicians in industry. With this, I'll stop, and then I will ask our speakers to actually present. So we'll start with our first speaker, Glenn Ricart from University of Utah. No, you'll take start the, yeah. All
right. Thank you. It's important to have the pickle. This is the pickle. Good morning. Thank you for being here. And I wanted to especially thank Amar and Orly for having me. My name is Glenn Ricart, and I am a philomath. I love learning. And I love learning new jobs, new opportunities. So I've spent roughly, this is very roughly, a decade in each of academia, government research, for-profit companies, and I'm currently with a nonprofit startup. So it's given me an opportunity to really see things from many different directions, and I really appreciate that. So in the beginning, here I am. I'm a student. I'm going into Case Institute of Technology. And I take, it turns out, a great course. You may have heard of Lajos Tokac, the probabilist. I took probability theory from him, and that gave me a great love for mathematics in general. and in particular for probability, and especially for understanding what can happen in the future, how you can predict the future using probabilities. And of course, that's at the heart of AI these days. It's at the heart of being able to understand simulations and what's going on. And it's probably a reason that I'm here is because of him when I was there. Now, I was also interested in computers. It turns out that Case was the place that Donald Knuth had been. And if you know the name Donald Knuth, you know he was one of the original computer scientists. And the picture at the bottom left there, I believe the back of the head and the striped shirt toward the bottom right is me, because I got this picture from a website of one of my suite mates. So I'm pretty sure that's me working on the Case computer. And by the way, I went there instead of MIT because when I went to MIT and asked if I could use a computer, I was admitted. They said, well, maybe when you're a junior, you could do something with one of the faculty members. They have computers here. And when I went to Case and I said, if I came here, could I use a computer? They said, go right on over there to the building and they'll get you an account. And I was punching cards the same day. Okay, so here's kind of my engagement journey. I won't go over this in long detail, but I started off as a student at Case. While I was still at Case, I did a startup with my suite mates. It turns out that we needed tuition money. The university needed federal reports on the university that they didn't have any way of producing. Well, we could write code. We could write report writing code. And sure enough, we began to pay for our tuition by writing reports for the administration. So that's the, so that was my first of 5 entrepreneurial events there. And then you can see the ones in yellow are government research. The ones in blue are for-profit. The ones in green are entrepreneurial. And they've all been for-profit except for this last one at the bottom right, which is a nonprofit startup, because I decided I hadn't done that one, so I have to go and do that one. So what are the entrepreneurial success factors? From my point of view, the most important one is that you have to find an underserved market, someplace that needs you, someplace that isn't already fully occupied with people who are there. And you have to be able to have some kind of advantage in working in that market. You have to have an entrepreneurial advantage, a patent, a way of approaching the world, a methodology, an understanding of having 2 languages that no one else has, something like that that gives you an advantage in that way. And we also, of course, need to go and have early loyal customers. You have to find somebody who needs what you can provide. Because even though you can provide it, if they don't need it, it's not going to work out that well. So that's, I think, the small committed team. You're going to hear some of these, I think, from other folks. You have to have strengths and you have to be able to go and make that work. So I think that I also want to tell you about future markets for applied mathematicians that I think need new startups. Okay, so this is my shopping list for you folks to go and look at things. So markets that make better use of, I'm sorry, there we go. I'm going to get a better view there, of shared resources. We have a lot of shared resources. How can we make better use of them? Better resource utilization is a classic economics case, which relies on classic mathematics. I think that markets are kind of the important thing. A market is made by somebody who has goods or ideas to sell and people who need them. Can you help make markets? If you can make markets, you can connect people that have money with people who need things that money can buy. So take a look at those markets. Right now, I think important ones to go into, if you're here a student, take a look at energy markets. Energy, as you can see, is changing dramatically. It's going to become even more precious to get that right. Air pollution markets. I run a monthly call. You're welcome to come join. We talk about new ideas in air pollution markets on that monthly call. I'm trying to get other folks involved. Transportation markets, like how about getting more vehicles to not only be autonomous, to be connected to each other, and be able to efficiently platoon with one another so as to reduce the amount of energy it takes and the amount of pavement it takes to make them work. Let's see, what else do I have down here? The confidence monitor is covering up the first couple of words there. More productive labor. Okay, well, the last one I can't read, but you can.
It's right there.
Education education.
Oh, education markets, yes. There are people who need to know things that you know. So play in those markets, and I think you'll be successful. Mathematics for markets, do I have more time? Can I keep going?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay, all right. Personal digital agents for fluctuating market conditions. Help me have an agent that understands how I can play in those markets. We need that. Make it a startup for us, please. The cost of privacy in market making. I don't want to give away all my information. How can I have some privacy and still make things work? There's a lot of work that's already been done, but I think much more that needs to be done. Managing edge computing. We've been talking edge computing, but there's very little actually out there. The edge is still coming. It's an opportunity that you have to be able to make a significant difference. Quantum algorithms, going back to Takach. Think about what these algorithms are. How will you compute them? How will you network them together? Quantum networking, very important, very rapid moving area right now. Love to have you working in that. Time and place sensitive information theory. Information theory is terrific. Learn information theory. You really need it. Now add time and place to information theory. And there's some very good startups, I think, that are going to be available there, especially in mathematics. And finally, if you're into AI, there's these things underlying the LLMs called transformers. And we're going right now on a fairly crude kind of transformer and attention mechanism. You can come up with some better ones, and I encourage you to go do that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Glenn. Our second speaker is Rob Schreiber from Cerebras.
Thanks for coming. Thank you, Orly and Amr, for running the panel. Well, I have about as much experience as Glenn. We began college at 1967 together. But it's a little different. I've been with entrepreneurs and in startup companies or startup projects and observed rather than studied what the entrepreneurs do. So why do you want to be an entrepreneur? What brings you here? Perhaps you want to run a company. I have a new take, which is, no company is run by one person. No company, if it's not a two-person company. And there's typically a sort of level just below, like cabinet secretaries who are supposed to have power. And I've been in that role in quite a number of companies. And they, together with the CEO or the entrepreneur, are what really makes a new company viable. So you can be an entrepreneur without necessarily being the capo di tutti capi. To become rich and fast, you should probably find some other way to do it. I mean, it can happen, but it's really hard to predict, and the odds are not so great. So, I'm okay financially and okay by fame, and it has nothing to do with any of the startups I've ever participated in. Always max out your 401k. Get your ideas out into the market. That's a very good reason. That's a terrific reason to be involved in new companies. Why? Because old companies are really slow moving. And I think, a different take on the points Glenn was making about where to look. It's where is a new technology? There's either a new possibility enabled by technologies, or a new technology is just waiting to be brought out. And there's a market, and the big companies don't see it. They're conservative. They don't take risks. Now, the history of our industry was IBM, mainframes. They thought that was going to be there forever, and it wasn't. Then digital equipment and mini computers. They thought that would be there forever, and it wasn't. Then VLSI-based microprocessor chips and personal computers. Digital blew that. They totally missed it. So we got Sun Microsystems, and then we got the graphics-based in Silicon Graphics. There have been many phases of this displacement of established companies that were too slow to take advantage of either something in the market, but maybe a new technology that the electrical engineers have provided. And all you have to do is figure out what to do. Andy Bechtolsheim, one of the most famous and successful entrepreneurs in the Valley, who was a founder of Sun, I first saw when he was a grad student with lots and lots of hair and no shoes, walking around the Stanford CS department with a PC board, and it had a Motorola 68,000 microprocessor on it, and nobody in any company was doing that yet. That became Sun. So he got his idea in the marketplace. So I've been with startups, TRW array processors that gave us VLIW machines along with multiflow. Saxby, where I became the CTO. By the way, the people, you know, the cabinet secretaries, there were 4 of us. After a few weeks, realized that the CEO was a bit off his rocker, and so we went to the investors and said, it's either him or us, and they said, well, thanks for working here, goodbye, to the founder. Saxby was, you know, an early parallel machine. MassPar, I was a consultant. I wrote all the linear algebra software. It was a follow-up to thinking machines, but done better. It was a nice machine. Michael Mascagni can tell you about it because they had one at Center for Supercomputing Applications. Yeah. The new one is Cerebras, which is a fantastic company, selling machines as fast as we can make them, and it's got a technical advantage. So it's doing something that the electrical engineers made possible that opened doors, and it's to build a machine using a chip that is not the size of a quarter, it's the size of a plate. It's an 8-inch square. Has nearly 1 million processors on it, and no memory bottleneck and no communication bottleneck. There have been software research projects too, at mass parallel benchmarks, high performance Fortran, a synthesis of ASIC chips automatically from program specifications of the function, and sparse matrices in MATLAB. Let me tell you about that. That was kind of an entrepreneurial thing. Many of us wanted sparse matrices in MATLAB because didn't have them, and you couldn't store a matrix bigger than, I don't know, 100 by 100 or something on your PC, and then MATLAB would say, out of memory, too bad, go away. But we all loved MATLAB. It was so much better than programming in anything else, and we needed sparse matrices. So a lot of people were poking Cleve Muller in, you know, the ribs and saying, give us sparse matrices, and finally one day he said, okay, let's do it. And, you know, it was a project done by 3 people who all thought alike, had a lot of experience with MATLAB and matrices, and you know, they gave us access to the source code of MATLAB. We wrote it. They shipped it. Now everybody uses it. We didn't make a nickel. It was getting our ideas into general practice, and I'm glad we did it that way. Entrepreneurs, you know, people, I've worked on chips and networks and systems all in HP Labs, and a lot of those things were projects that could have been taken to venture capitalists. In fact, one was, and one of those projects spun out of HP Labs. Big companies don't like to take risks, so that's where they were born and lived and maybe died. And, you know, I've had consulting and CTO jobs. So success depends on how you define success. Glenn mentioned risks. I don't think, or for the definitions, I think they got that wrong. There's little risk in being an entrepreneur in this business. You're going to gain experience. You're going to have challenges. You're going to find research problems to work on. You'll work in a team, much more of a big team than you would unless you've got huge funding. Than you would have in an academic environment. You talk to customers, to companies, to investors, a broad exposure to a lot of different things. And with not very high probability, you might get a little extra money. So I've never had a bad experience in one of these startups, even though most of them yielded me a paycheck and nothing more. As somebody once said to me when I was 30-something and a little worried when startup number 1 was going down the tubes, he said, you know, in your case, starvation is not a possibility. And that's true of all of you. So don't worry about that. Yeah, Cerebras might be the first one to get to an IPO. We're not there yet. What's the downside? There's, as I said, no risk. The only risk is the opportunity cost. You know, you could be doing something else. You're going to make a commitment. You're going to put in years, potentially, into this. And but no matter what you do, that's always there. it's interesting to understand risk, though, as seen by investors, because if you're going to start a company and you need money, you'll have to deal with investors. And they have studied this for a long time and have defined the 4 risks that they care about in startups. This is the VC mindset, venture capitalist mindset. Technical. You say you're going to do something. Elizabeth Holmes and Theranos, they didn't make it because of technical risk. Number 2 is market risk. You do what you say you're going to do. A few people buy it, not enough. They give you enough money to get going, the venture capitalists. At some point, they're going to say, enough's enough. Start bringing money in. And you'll always need more, because in this field, you have to develop the next system, the next system, the next system. Your costs grow as the company matures. They don't get smaller. So market risk is you bring in money, but not fast enough. Pierre Lamond, one of our investors, 90-something years old, famous Silicon Valley guy, worked at Fairchild and Intel with Gordon Moore, and all these. He was the CEO of National Semi, one of the earliest. He said, he's an investor in Cerebras, he said, most of the companies I invest in do what they say they're going to do. The market risk is the difficult one. Management risk, well, we saw that at the first company where we had to dump the CEO. And finance, that's basically, you didn't raise enough to begin with. It's going to cost more than you thought. You have trouble getting enough money to do what you want to do. But the thing you work on the technical and pay attention to the market, and that's pretty much the things you need to be concerned with. Don't fund this out of your own pocket, please. I've seen it happen multiple times. It leads to divorces and things like that. If there's a reason you can't get funding from the people who do that for a living, if you can't, there may be a good reason for that. And look to your business plan, not your 401k, as a way to get past that problem. Now, the best thing is if you don't need outside investment. Let's take MathWorks. They've never taken a nickel. They've had many, many, many offers to sell the company. Why? Because Cleve wrote it. Cleve Moeller wrote the thing as a Fortran program in order to teach linear algebra in academia. It was funded by his salary. Then a couple of EE students at Stanford they took Cleve's course, they loved MATLAB, but they realized it's Fortran, it has no graphics, you can't program it, there were no M files. We can fix all that and make it run on an IBM PC, just as a little skunkworks project in somebody's garage. And they started the company, and the rest was history. So it's completely funded out of a little bit of funding from universities that didn't know they were funding it, and then the revenue. It's much better than having to sell the company to investors. That only works for software. If you want to build hardware, you're not going to do it that way. Collaboration, not companies. Projects like what we heard about, that should be PETC. I don't know what the D's doing there. And Deal 2, which we heard about. These and many more of these in the math business. It's more likely that you will have customers within the math community. That's a fairly small market. And nevertheless, you get a lot of the same benefits, except the financial one, by engaging in this kind of an entrepreneurial effort that leads to useful artifacts that might not necessarily be big economic wins. Some companies get spun out. These are two. I forget the company that provides Slurm as a business. It's a cluster scheduling software. Comes out of the DOE. LSTC, Livermore Software Technology. It was LS Dyna, mechanical engineering. Then they're viable companies. They're not Meta. They're not Google. But they're viable companies. So that's about it. Thanks for listening.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Daniel Shabtai.
Hi, everyone. So I feel very privileged to hear about from our previous panelists so far about a lot of the concepts of entrepreneurship. I'm going to be sharing more of my journey. I'm not as seasoned in every aspect there, and so it's also a fun learning experience here for me. I'll be sharing my background and how I found myself where I am today. So I spent, before joining the effort for Prism AI as CTO and co-founder, I spent over a decade at Meta. And it was very interesting because I joined them when it was still Facebook. It was a very small company at the time. And I got to grow with the company. I saw how the company shifts from a small company where everyone knows everyone to a company that is over 100,000 people. I got to do different roles as director of engineering and supporting different organizations there. A lot of fun, a lot of experience that you gain along the way. I'll share a few key examples of things that I had impact on. I got to build video from scratch in Facebook, so we had nothing, and we kind of built this product, and I got to lead the video product area that became second to YouTube. At the time, that was the leading video platform. And it was also building a lot of foundational components that are used until today in a lot of video platforms, like that auto-playing video and sound, no sound, the scrolling experience that you see on TikTok and other reels and so on. Other areas that I touched in Meta were I got to be the director of engineering of a space called under people engineering. It's a strange name, I know. It was how we utilize a lot of the math, a lot of machine learning in order to grow the company. And it's fun because you also get to define interviewing, get to do hundreds of interviews and figure out what is the right path for understanding, is this the right fit, not a right fit. That's another role I took, and my most recent role there was I was leading the organization responsible for integrity automation, which is finding all the bad content, bad people on all the platforms. This was a role that was relevant for Instagram, WhatsApp. And when I say bad, I mean like the scum of the earth. I'm talking human trafficking, child predators, things that you really don't want around you. So that was a very interesting role to do there. After a decade there, I got to jump on a new area that was a passion of mine. Also, before I started at Facebook, was relevant to research I've done, and that's around Prism. From here onwards, I'll expand a little bit about what we're doing, my excitement about this, and in relation to math, obviously. So, like any other area, it's kind of becoming a slogan. AI is a breakthrough in so many areas, and that's the case also in the field of healthcare, where we're reaching a place where we're able to do screening to detect disease. We're able to understand disease models. We're able to figure out specific treatments for specific people. It's amazing, and I wanted to be part of this wave. I was excited about this. I was privileged enough to say, I don't want to do this, I wanted that, and I went ahead and jumped on that. I'll share with you some problems that we're tackling just so that you understand also the mathematical concept here. So AI principles are used everywhere. You can use it when you have a large enough amount of data, whether it's for supervised learning or LLMs or foundational models. And it's used also in healthcare when you're seeing on the left side there where you have abundance of amount of data and you can run things like foundation models for learning a lot from this data and having lab results. This is lab-based results. You can verify them in labs. And the area that we're tackling is more on the right side there, where you have very complex data, multidimensional data. It's data that comes from multiple sources, but it's for a specific group of patients, as in you have a tiny sample size. You have 200 people if you're lucky. So how do you extract the maximum value from that area? And the solution here is fascinating since it actually came from physics. I'm happy that Orly is here. Orly is one of the researchers, our main scientific founder that worked on this area. And she was working in, pardon me for sharing your story here, it's fun for me. Coming from the physics department in Stanford, being able to transition the mathematical models to what we're doing in PRISM. And that means we're able to take an unsupervised approach, and we're doing something called data harmonization, which means that we're taking a lot of types of data and making it into something that we can extract value from. We're dealing with batch effects, so if you're not from healthcare field, batch effects, and I'm simplifying it, it's equivalent to dirty data. It's not really, but it's equivalent to dirty data where you're getting much stronger signals from technical variation versus health variation, like the medical component, the biological component. That means that you're in a place where you're able to detect what hospital it was taken in. You're seeing more correlation there versus disease versus healthy. That's not what you're trying to do there. These are the main concepts that we're using there. Another problem area that we're trying to tackle, and this is again related to entrepreneurship in terms of what do you want to solve? What problems are there out there? And here we're at a place where we're building a physical network, a global network for data. So as I mentioned, you have only a few patients. You want to have strong statistical power there. You're trying to get as many patients as possible. So we're working with different leading healthcare organizations across the world where we're able to do this, pool and aggregate data and get a higher statistical power there. How we're doing it, briefly I'll say that it's very similar to PRISM in optics, where you have an untrained device, a PRISM, and you have a light beam, and the device doesn't care where this light beam came from or anything like that. It just knows based on the physical properties to figure out based on wavelengths and break it down. And that's similar to what we're doing there. We're able to put all the data together, create a tensor, and from that create different categories, fingerprints, and from that we can figure out severity of disease, potential of influence of a drug on specific patients, and so on. And just as an example, just to get the concept of why I'm so excited about this, this is an example of work we've done with a small biotech company. They were having challenges with batch effects, where they were able to see that different areas correlate together based on the site that the test was taken, not based on healthy and disease. And we asked them for the data, and we ran it through our program. That's what you're seeing on the top there. This is the based on sites. We ran it, and we were able to find 4 different signatures for male healthy, male disease, female healthy, female disease. And it's not intuitive because, wait, I'd expect to see healthy and disease, but we're seeing here 4 groups. And when going back and getting the understanding of what we're looking at, so they shared that this was rheumatoid arthritis, which is in the scientific world, almost seen as separate diseases for males and females in terms of symptoms and severity and so on. So that was very exciting. Another example is work we've done with the NCI, with the National Cancer Institute, where we were helping with going through the data with a clinical test that they were running with a combination drug on different types of cancer. And over there, we were able to detect the likelihood of being affected, successful treatment of the drug. This is my last slide, I assure you. This is something that really is important for me to share with you, because I think when it comes to starting something new, it's so important to surround yourself with talented people. I'm not looking for people that are as talented as me in my field or anything like that, but are the superstars in their field. And I'm lucky to be working with such folks, and I think it's critical for any startup that takes a certain direction to figure out who are the right people to do the job here. I mean, working with Asaf, our CEO, he's an experienced entrepreneur with a successful startup in the pharma industry. Orly, that I mentioned, is a professor in Utah who's done all this research, and Dave, who's also here, an experienced researcher from MIT and Stanford. Like, I'm surrounded with talent, so I think that's a critical part to take into consideration. That's my part of the talk. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Daniel. Our next speaker, or last speaker actually, Viral Shah.
Thanks, Amar. Great to be here. SIAM CSE is always a wonderful conference to be at, and I'm delighted to be here. I'm waiting for the slides to load.
Just take a minute.
It'll take a couple of minutes. But in the meanwhile, So I'm Viral Shah. I'm one of the creators of the Julia language, and today I'm one of the co-founders of Julia Hub. And this is, what I wanted to do was share our story, right? I think, the early, Glenn and Rob spoke about sort of the broad framework around entrepreneurship, right? And I think you guys touched upon all the different aspects, right? Raising money, product, math, engineering. And Daniel, you shared your sort of perspective on building a company, and I thought I'll round it out by sharing our perspective of how we started what I would call a project, right? The Julia project, and our transition to making it into a company and having a suite of products. I think the most important thing here is, and I say, this is not just my story, but the story of all my co-conspirators as well, and that not just includes my co-founders, but sort of all of our management team and all of our technical leads and engineers and salespeople and everyone who sort of have to come together to build a company. I'm actually going to focus on a few different things and maybe go into a little bit of detail on some of them, but just a little bit about me. I started out with my PhD at UC Santa Barbara. John Gilbert was my advisor. And Rob spoke about building the sparse matrix packages in MATLAB. John was one of the other people, and I was delighted to have been mentored by him. And my PhD was actually on building parallel sparse graph algorithms. Some of that work actually spun out into this company called Interactive Supercomputing that was founded by Alan Edelman, and that's where I sort of had my first startup experience. And I sort of had this taste of, hey, can we build something that can compete with some of the big companies in the market? After that company got acquired by Microsoft, I actually moved on to a very different kind of project, which used math in a very different way, which was India's social security system. It's called Aadhaar. I wrote a book about it called Rebooting India. If you've ever heard about the Aadhaar project, you should check it out. But what we essentially did was collected, I know this might sound awful to some of the folks out here in the US, but I can guarantee you this was a game changer for us back in India, where we collected all the biometrics for 1.5 billion people at a rate faster than Facebook or WhatsApp onboarded them. So you got 1.5 billion people in about 7 years, deduplicated each one, right? So I took everyone's iris scans and compared them with everyone else to make sure that everyone got a unique identification number, which was a huge challenge in and as of itself, but what it led to was a tremendous overhaul of India's social security platforms, and we ended up giving everyone a bank account and ended up saving billions of dollars doing that. So it was a tremendously interesting project that I was very excited to have been part of. And it's entrepreneurship, but this was entrepreneurship in government, although I'm not going to speak a lot about that right now, but I would, we speak a lot about that in our book. But since 2015, we've been working on this thing called Julia, which I started actually, all the time when I was back in India, out there rolling out this project in all the villages of India. I started, hacking on my laptop along with 4 other people, and that's what became Julia. This idea that, hey, can we have this a programming language that is not just easy to use, but is also fast? So something that's as easy as Python or MATLAB, but is as fast as C. Fast forward from 2009 to 15, we formed a company called Julia Hub, and that's what I'll speak about a little bit. So this is how a project starts, right? We started this project, this is actually the actual text. This is exactly the actual text from our blog post called Why We Created Julia. We published this blog post in 2012, and it started with just, something simple, like we're greedy, we want more. And then we have this long list of things about like how this will be the best language that you've ever seen. It can do, all the linear algebra you can imagine. It's got the speed of C. It's got all the, functional programming that Lisp has, and so on and so forth. And cool, when we actually wrote this blog post, you could actually go to the Julia website and download Julia, compile, type make on your computer, and it would not ask you to provide a BLAS or provide all these other finicky libraries that you have to build all your software with, but it would actually build it all for you and give it to you. And yes, it met many of these promises. And okay, so we had this amazing project. We were, by 2015, I fast forward to the time when we started the company, Julia had over 1,500 contributors. The open source project, it had over 1,500 contributors by then. Within its first year of this announcement, it had over 100 open source contributors. Today, Julia has over 11,000 open source packages in addition to the million-odd users that use it out there, and it's tremendous. So, okay, we said we were going to start a company now. Great. We have a project. We have a big idea, solve the two-language problem, write your code in Python and run it in C. Who would not want it, right? Everyone wants it. Well, it turns out it was open source. No one wanted to pay for it. And this is the challenge. Like, this was entrepreneurship, by trial and by their feet held to the fire. And you think, okay, I got this thing. I'm gonna go in a straight line, right? Like, I have this thing. It's a big idea. It's game changing. All these people around the world are using it. Okay, so I'm just gonna convert this idea into a product, and then it's gonna be great, right? And after all, we've already done the hard part, but it turns out the reality is a bit more complicated. And my journey here has taught me that it's never a straight line from the idea to the product. It's actually that you have to solve the inverse problem. There is some other product out there, right? There is some other product out there that will leverage your idea, your big idea, but it's not the one you thought about. And that's the one, and I use the word find a product, not develop a product. So Glenn, you spoke about, you touched upon this very briefly, that apart from the technology, you need the market. But as you were speaking, I was thinking about this, like, it's never a straight line. All of us here are good at math. All of us are good at technology. All of us here can solve all the hard problems. But the product that is out there that people will pay for is not the one you imagine. And you have to go find that product and then ask yourself, what's the big idea that I have that will make this product happen? You literally have to find this, and this is where entrepreneurship is hard, in my opinion. And this is where I think many startups die. It's the mythical product market fit. However, it turns out reality is even more messier, because when you start finding that product, you're going to find there's not one, but there's three, or there's maybe five, right? Maybe you could take your idea and start a little consulting company, and you can bootstrap it. Forget those annoying investors. They're asking me for my business plan, and they don't get my vision and all this other stuff. You know what? I'm just going to build this thing on my own and take it to market. Great. That's one path. Now, there's, you might find that, I'm going to go around and I'm consulting, I'm getting my revenue, got my company off the ground. Now those pesky customers want me to actually solve their problems, and that's not my vision, All right, so now I'm going to build a product. Maybe I have I've learned something from these customers. Okay, I got a new idea now. Instead of my consulting business, I'm going to maybe create a product. And now I'm going to, now question, do I sell it to enterprise? Is it going to be product-led growth? Is it going to sell itself? Do I need salespeople? And suddenly, there are three other product ideas out there that you should be pursuing, and you need to raise capital for, and you need to take these ideas to market. So as you start finding your product market fit, as you build your company, the same big idea, the same mathematics, the same technology, there are multiple different paths you could take it to. Should I build a product, or should I build a platform, like that will support multiple products, right? Like, these things just keep sort of, preying upon in your mind. And as an entrepreneur, you have to be simultaneously optimistic and pessimistic. I've always been pessimistic. My startup's going to die next year. But I'm also optimistic that this is going to be a company that's going to be around for 100 years, and that's going to sort of, reimagine everything that I started out with. I will tell you that with Julia, we started with a particularly hard problem. And one thing is, you think you got a programming language, it's Turing complete. And Turing complete, like, it's got so much power. I can do anything with it. Well, it turns out with entrepreneurship and business, doing anything is actually too broad. The narrower you are, the better off you are, right? So we learned later on that we'd picked a very hard area to be in. Okay, but you navigate through all of this, and this is our story. This is what we did. So we started out with Julia. We started out with this amazing open source ecosystem that I spoke about, and we decided, over time, that the value was not in Julia itself for our company, but was in building modeling and simulation products using Julia, using the superpowers that Julia gives you, so that we could come up with an opinionated stack for modeling and simulation. And we decided to go down the path of building a platform. So, you have the beautiful scientific machine learning ecosystem in Julia. You have all these beautiful compiler tools, great. We started out very early with a product called Pumas in the pharmaceutical domain. We brought that product to market, actually spun out a company called Pumas AI, and Pumas today is, has been used to bring the Moderna vaccine to the market. It was used for the FDA certification for the Moderna vaccine. Since then, it's gone through 26, FDA submissions and acceptances. So we were like, okay, that's great. We heard the market. Every time we went to the customers, we said, you know what? Here's this Julia thing. It's got these amazing superpowers. Why don't you rewrite all your software using Julia, and we'll sell you the dev tools? And they would come back and tell us, no, give me that software. And that's when we learned that we need to talk to these industries and go out building these products. We are just in the process of launching Julia Sim, which is a simulation product for the engineers in the physical domain, and for users of system modeling tools like Simulink or Daimula or Modelica and so on and so forth. So this is the path we decided to take, an open source base, a cloud platform, and then individual products. And that's just the two we have. We're going to do a whole bunch more over the years. That's part of the 100-year plan. But next year, I got to ship Julia Sim. This is how we started. It was just 6 of us got together. Entrepreneurship is not a solo game. It's a team sport. If you're going to do this, you're going to need friends and partners who complement you in many different ways. And if you can't convince a couple others to join you, you probably have a bad idea. If you're going to make $1 billion, you'll be fine with 1/3 of $1 billion as well, right? That's how we started. This was JuliaCon at MIT. It's just tremendous to see. We had 600 people at MIT. The gap between those two pictures is almost 10 years. So it took a long time to go from one to the other, and we just feel like we barely started. So with that, I will go back to Amar.
Thank you very much. Well, thanks for all the speakers. Wonderful, actually, stories about successes, challenges, things like that. And I'll start with a question. So everybody talked about potentially their path, their career path, where they found some of the challenges and things like that. But I think I would say everybody started in their entrepreneurship journey early in their life. So I guess the question is, if I say, well, how many people actually start that? Probably few. So what are those skills, whether it is technical skills, personal skills, that will make an entrepreneur, basically?
I think it depends really on where you're, how are you driven? How do you drive yourself? Do you think internally about your own problems? Do you think externally about other people's problems? And how can you go and make sure that you are focusing on something that will have significant impact? I think that's probably where I would go on that. By the way, thanks for that talk. That was great.
Thank you. I fully agree with you. So I think the entrepreneur, you only become an entrepreneur when you want to bring an idea into the world that would not have existed if you didn't do it, right? That's my definition of why, people like us here should be starting companies. I mean, there are people out there who are starting all kinds of other companies that have nothing to do with innovation or math. But in our world, I feel like, I ask the question, if I didn't do this, would someone else do it? And when the answer is no, I'm like, okay, that's a good mission. And now, am I willing to do everything it takes to make it happen? And I think that's how I define as, the job of, how you become an entrepreneur. It's, you're forced into it in some sense. You're compelled into it.
Okay.
And I think you also can't be deterred by failure. If you're easily deterred by failure, you're not going to make it. And you will have failures, and they'll occur along the lines, and you have to back up and say, okay, if that door is closed, let's try this door over here.
So tolerance basically to potential failures, taking advantage of the failures to learn more.
Resilience.
Resilience.
I think you also mentioned something around large companies don't like to take risks. And asking this, it reminds me of the shift that I saw in the signs in the company from shifting from a relatively small company to a big one. So initially you were seeing all these signs about move fast, break things, done is better than perfect, very motivational components. And suddenly as the company grows, move fast, but maybe don't break as much. We're not taking as much risk here. So I think when thinking about something like that, yeah, absolutely take risks. You're not going to find yourself starving. I think this is your opportunity at a certain point of life, and you either go for it or not. So I'm a big fan of that.
Rob?
You have to communicate as well. So if you aren't a very good teacher, don't start a company. You're going to have to convince employees, investors, customers, teach them, get them all thinking pretty much in the right general direction. So communication is a key part of the job and you have to learn to let other people work on the details, even though you could do it faster, perhaps. There's too much for you to do.
And when you're communicating, you need to make sure you're putting yourself in the other person's shoes. What are they hearing out of what I'm saying? And how do I help make sure that I'm communicating well by having both what I want to say and what they want to hear coming together in the message?
Thank you. Thanks. My second question, actually, I mean, there are a lot of startups. And I don't have the statistics, but probably, not sure what, probably the majority would fail. There are few that will succeed. In your opinion, what would, if you pick one or two kind of key success factors, which one would you think the two key success factors for the success of a startup? Luck could be one.
Timing.
What else?
Timing.
Okay.
Get there, see an opportunity a month before the other guy.
Not too much before, right?
Oh, that's interesting. Oh, yeah, that's right. So as researchers, we can see pretty far ahead. We can get way ahead of where the market is going to be. So the issue is that's a timing issue, not too far ahead. But you have to hit the market when it's ready to accept this new idea, like the microprocessor and the personal workstation. We were all so tired of command line interfaces in ASCII on terminals. We just didn't know that there was something better until those products arrived, right?
And I'd add determination. You have to be determined. Not everyone is going to immediately pick up on it. And you have to be an educator. If you're already an educator, that's a big advantage because you're educating your customer as to why they want your product.
I would say also going for, similar again to what was said here, going for the things that you don't think maybe are necessarily going to work or easy to implement. And I was thinking this in the context of what we're doing in prison, for instance, we're tackling the complex side with small amount of samples, and that wasn't very trivial for me. It looks like impossible to achieve. And I'd encourage you to, by the way, also today at 420, Ori's going to speak. I'd encourage you to hear more of that. She's way better than me in explaining what's going on there. But go for what you think is questionable that others won't necessarily want to go for.
So let me follow up on this because I think Rob mentioned some of the risks, and one of them is a technical risk, right? So you could go for something that is not obvious, not clear, but it could be too difficult, right? So how do you balance between something that you'd say, well, yeah, it could succeed, you still have some time that you need to figure out when it will succeed in a time that you can get the product to the market and actually start getting some revenue. Rob, yeah.
A wonderful experience was in the first startup, Saxby Computer. The VP of engineering came to me a year or two into the project, said, Rob, I finally figured this company out. This is not a company. This is a research project. If you have no research, that's bad. If you're too far from the goal when you begin, that's bad too.
Yeah. One other question, I think it is related to something that you mentioned. You said you need to surround yourself with the right people. And the right people could be the right people with the right technical skills, the right behavioral skills, people who understand management, potentially marketing, things like that. So how do you start this? I mean, how do you start thinking about, well, I have an idea, I have a thought, or maybe two of us have an idea, thought, and for a product that could be valuable for somebody in the market. How do you get from that point to start building that team that will take it to the next level?
From my perspective, it's counterintuitive, but it's kind of the concept of failure. I'm looking at my past, and there's nothing like experience for making the better decisions, but eventually it's also knowing to embrace the failure. Like the best lessons throughout my career were when I failed miserably, and I said, I'm not going to let this happen again. That's one thing, and I'm giving it maybe in a negative context of failure, but it's really important to also know to fail fast, as in knowing to say, wait, this is not working, let's shift away to another direction. This flexibility, I think, is critical throughout the path, especially at the beginning, where I used to credit people for failing fast. I used to look at what they were able to save us by saying, wait a minute, this is not working, and shifting from that direction. So pardon me again from taking it from a negative perspective, but that's the biggest lessons I had throughout my path.
I would say that communicating would be another part of like building this team, right? Just, it's not just communicating to your investors and your customers, but you're communicating, to the first 10 people, first 50 people you hire into your company, right? Because if you can't convince someone, to join your company, you're not going to get anywhere. So even once you get off the ground, once, you got your co-founders, you found some business, you got some money, you got off the ground, your key challenge is going to be hiring the right people. And you don't want yes men who agree with all of what you say. You want people who challenge you, right? So
yeah, you want to be a company with a great idea, exciting and growing, and people want it. So let's think about Google. Sergey and Larry had a good idea, but they didn't turn Google into what it is. These people, I'm blanking on some names, but you may remember, some of the people just under them made huge contributions to the success. Right?
The cabinet members.
Yes, that's right. Secretary of Hardware. Yeah.
Okay, well, I would like to actually turn it to the audience if you have any questions to the panel. Yeah.
Thank you so much for taking the time to speak to all of us about this. I'm coming from an academic background, so I'm currently a postdoc and exploring what to do next. And when you said something about fail fast, I realized that most of you have had some industry experience post-academia before you jumped into this. So I feel like when you're doing a PhD, for instance, you're told to keep trying, try different avenues, just try and get there, right? You have that sort of persistence drilled into you. Whereas in industry, maybe you're told to change directions much quicker. So did the industrial experience you had before, did that help you in entrepreneurship? And is that sort of a right way to go about it if you want to jump into it?
Great question. So when do you decide whether to keep going or fail fast? Is that the experience from industry that give you that kind of mindset?
I think it depends a lot on the reception that you can get when you're convincing folks. If you can get people to nod their heads enough and say, oh, yeah, okay, you're probably on the right track. If you keep getting, doesn't make sense to me, that's probably a sign that you're either not explaining it well, or there's something that you really need to change about your motivation, where you're coming from, where you'll be going to. And I think everybody on this panel has adapted on their journey, right? None of us actually delivered the thing we originally thought we were delivering. We're delivering something that it turns out the market does need, and we learned that along our journey. So don't be afraid to start, and don't be afraid to change, and don't be afraid to succeed.
Thank you.
I want to maybe add a slightly different color to the fail fast thinking, right? So if your thing is not going to make it, if you're going to use your time to establish that this was not the right thing to be spending the next 10 years on, then you definitely want to fail fast. But any meaningful idea or contribution to society will not happen over 2-3 years. It's going to be a decade of your life. It's maybe going to be even longer. And at that point, at least as an entrepreneur, the only thing that stands between you and getting that vision out there is capital, right? If you can't pay the people who work for you, your company is not going to be around. You can withstand everything else. You can change your product. You can change your management team. You can grow the team. You can shrink the team. But at the end of the day, you can never run out of capital. So, there's fail fast on one hand, but then there's also like, if you're convinced this is the thing that you need to see through, then the only thing in my mind that stands between you and getting there is money. It's just, unfortunately, it's just brute force. Like, can't do without it.
Did you mention that academia may not give you all the experience you need to do this?
In the sense of persistence is drilled more so than completely new approach to try and do the same problem.
So I had I was 100% academic, right, and an assistant professor, but I needed to make ends meet in Silicon Valley, which was already in 1979 too expensive for people just out of grad school. So I got a consulting, just by chance, I got a consulting job with a company that wanted to build a parallel computer. And that was great. That was a first introduction to the business of, technology. So consult.
Thank you.
I do think, Rob, you're right that so if you're jumping straight from academia into entrepreneurship of any kind, I think it is pretty hard, because I look at my journey as a student, and as fulfilling as academia was, I had no idea about how the world worked, and you got to learn that somewhere. I mean, yes, Mark Zuckerberg and Bill Gates, they just kind of hopped out of their dorm rooms and built these multi-billion-dollar companies. But I don't think, I think that's the exception, and the norm is the otherwise.
Susie.
All right, thank you very much. Thanks, Amar, for putting together a wonderful panel. This has been fantastic. So when we talk about the characteristics needed to be an entrepreneur, entrepreneurship, so in my mind, so I'd like you to correct me if I'm wrong, but I think there has to be some boldness, some, I like to say, moxie, gumption, all these sorts of things. Do you think that's something you would add to your list? Or, because I don't, you can have ideas and you can even be somewhat driven, but it feels to me that there's this thing that you have to say, hey, I'm going to go for it, right? And we don't all have that. Can you speak to that a bit?
I would call that belief in yourself.
Mm-hmm. And I guess risk taking. I mean, we discussed this. I think I mean, how many people will come out school and say, I want to start my own company, right? There's a lot of uncertainty, right? So there is a...
One definition of research, which is way too simple, is if you don't know it's going to succeed before you start. So if you like that kind of research, then maybe you've got the mindset to do something.
I'll also call out that I encountered so many people that have imposter syndrome, that they're saying, no, I can't do this. I don't know how. Someone made a mistake. I got here somehow. And it's, I think, critical to just go for it and believe in yourself and embrace, as I said, also for yourself. When you came up with this question, can I do it? Of course you can do it. You never know if you don't try. So call it boldness, whatever it is. I say don't question yourself. Give it a go. Let yourself fail. Let yourself learn and move forward and learn from it.
Beautiful.
There's
And I
very
think
little
Orly
risk of
wanted to add
starvation.
some comments. You want to use this?
Susan, thank you so much for the question. I just wanted to remind everyone from the panel yesterday where we had Joon-Sun Kim, who's the founder of IonQ, a quantum computing company that's now on NASDAQ, I think the first one, or anyways on Wall Street somewhere. Anyways, Joon-Sun was saying, you only live once. And I guess he got it from his girls. It's a fashionable thing to say today, I guess, YOLO. But it's the truth. So if you're not going to do what you want with the time that you're given on Earth, then you may regret it a little bit at some point. So just go for it.
Thank you. Other questions?
We love questions.
Please.
Well, this is perhaps a strange question, but I'll ask it anyway. I notice you're all men, and I wonder if you have any comment or perspective on how young women in this community can move forward. Is it the same? Is the advice exactly the same, or is it different, or are there elements of context that should be taken into account or thought of differently, or anything else you would say?
I've had some great partners who are women, and I think that, first of all, no two people are the same. So getting two people together gets you more than 1 + 1. You get 2.5 at least, because you get a discussion, you get to go and take an idea and refine it. And I think that I've had just as good discussions with women as men in making these decisions. Of my 11 patents, 5 of them are with women. So I think that it's just a matter of being forthright, approaching everyone, being inclusive in your group that you form, to make sure that you've got all the skills that you'd like to have in your company.
I'll call that. I feel privileged to have the opportunity to work with Orly that I mentioned earlier, and I see her as an inspiration for my daughter, and I just don't see any difference there. So I wish there were more representation here of women, but I don't think that's an indication of ability to succeed.
Yeah. I think Roscoe, you made a great point, and it's true. However, just take the company I'm with now, which is led by a guy. Happens to have grown up on the Stanford campus. Both of his parents are professors or retired. But at that second level, we have some amazingly successful women. One was a math professor at St. Petersburg, the one in Russia, who's just brilliant at what she does in the company, running a customer-facing organization. Another was a Stanford CS grad, but she's a tremendous communicator. If she hadn't done CS, she would have done English Lit. And they're just thriving and succeeding, extremely well in the environment. I hope one of them will start a company of her own.
Thank you.
Sure.
Please.
Amr, so thanks very much. The next session starts at 12 minutes.
Okay. Okay.
We're 3 minutes past the end of time for this.
It's up to you guys.
Okay. Yeah, maybe since they need to set up the...
That's just fine.
I'll take this opportunity. Thank you very much. I mean, the panelists are available if you'd like to ask questions after we finish. But I'd like to take the opportunity to thank you guys very, very much for the wonderful presentation and the lively discussion. I hope that this was beneficial to the audience, and thank you again.
Thank you.